What's happening, everyone? Welcome back into the Fantasy Stock Exchange. We're joined by a special guest today. We got Dr. Edwin Porras of Fantasy Points. We're going to be talking about some injuries today. So on this episode, we're going to be talking quarterbacks and running backs. Next Thursday, you'll see the wide receivers and tight ends episode of that. But we're talking about the guys that you're scared to draft. And Edwin here is an actual professional doctor. We'll get him to give his credentials after this. But how you guys doing today?
Not too bad. Again, we'll have them linked in the description and everything. Super pumped to have them on. I'm sure you guys will appreciate us getting you such an informative type episode out there on the channel. You come out here with the big facts. But Edwin, take it away. How you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. I just got back I'm living that California life. Just recently moved here. And so we just got back from the beach today. And so I'm rolling right off the road from coming from the beach. So I'd say I'm living a pretty damn good life.
I definitely wish I could go to the beach right now, but here in Canada, they're a little more strict with everything. But we're rolling.
Social distance and masks, right? Social distance.
For sure. Hit that intro.
Are you ready, Jerry?
I'm ready.
Just want to make sure you're ready, brother. Show me the money.
All right, so let's get right into this. So the first guy that we got up on the docket here is pretty high profile considering it just happened, and that's Cam Newton. So I guess the last 2 years he's been dealing with a Liz Frank surgery as well as some kind of shoulder strain or shoulder issue that he had. How concerned are you, kind of just on a scale of 1 to 10 kind of thing, for Cam Newton going forward?
So concern on a scale from 1 to 10. For week 1, I'd have to say like a 5, just because we don't know for a fact that he's 100% healthy yet. That generally speaking, the Liz Frank surgeries, those take They take 6 to 10 months, generally speaking, clinically. The data actually shows they can take anywhere from 8 to 12 months to get to be completely healed and players to come back and play. So when it comes to, am I 100% confident that he'll be ready for week 1? Not quite, but I definitely think that by week 3 or 4, he's going to be ready to go. It's going to be one of those things that's going to be touch and go. We don't know a lot about what's going on with his rehab. We don't know a lot. We're especially not going to know anything now, considering that he's a Patriot. You know, the New England Patriots are the worst team trying to decipher anything out. But just the fact that there are some rumblings about, Jarrett Stidham could be the starter in week 1. I don't think that has anything to do with talent, man. I mean, are you really going to start a rookie quarterback that's thrown like 3 passes in the NFL over a former MVP if that former MVP is healthy? Probably not.
Probably
even
not.
if you're Bill Pellet. Yeah.
The veterans aren't going to let that fly in training camp, especially
right. Exactly.
Cam Newton's looking like he's fully healthy and stuff.
Yeah. I mean,
exactly. If he's fully healthy, I don't necessarily see it being a problem. But just because there's been so much sort of vagueness around the injury, the foot injury. I'm not 100% certain, but if he's following the law of averages, then I think he should be fine.
All right, perfect. Yeah.
Sorry, one thing I wanted to talk about is the foot concern you more, or is it the shoulder that concerns you? Because I know with the Liz Frank, you get like a screw put into your foot, is my understanding.
That's the Brown,
people.
Right?
Pardon?
That's what happened to Marquise Brown, right?
Yeah, Marquise Brown had it last year. I'm more concerned personally. I'm not a doctor or anything. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but the shoulder was the part that concerned me, because I saw it in week 2 against when he played the Buccaneers. He looked like he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn when he was throwing. So
yeah, so the shoulder is actually completely healthy. The last time that he underwent an arthroscopic surgery, they actually looked at the throwing shoulder. I think he had like a left shoulder issue. They looked at the throwing shoulder, and that looked completely fine. He wasn't having any symptoms, so the shoulder isn't an issue. And that leads to like the bigger conversation about our running quarterbacks, and is Cam Newton specifically more likely to get injured, which the answer is no, because his initial injury was actually like diving for a tackle. So a lot of people like to frame his, style of play in terms of, is he more injury prone or not when it comes to Cam Newton, but he should be good to go from the shoulder. He has never been an accurate passer, right? No. I feel like he just got this shoulder injury, and people wanted to pin something on him being a bad passer. He's just not a great passer. And that's like, we can come to terms with that and still view him as, a top, in NFL terms, of course, like a top 10 to 15 quarterback. Like, he's definitely up there. But the shoulder should be good. I'm not concerned about the shoulder whatsoever.
For sure. I mean, talking about Newton, I mean, people were making the big concern, oh, he's not throwing the ball down the field like right after the shoulder happened. Now we're looking at it a full range ahead. I mean, just projecting forward for the Patriots this year, again, as people will sort of be hesitant. Oh, they're worried about the injuries. They're worrying about him taking the year basically off after basically getting put on the IR last year. Now, if you're projecting it forward, do you think he has the potential to reach like that top 12 upside if he's able to stay healthy for the year again?
I definitely think he can be top 12. I think top 12 is I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibilities, right? So the foot has to stay healthy, and generally speaking, those injuries do heal well, and those injuries do especially after the first year, they get better and they don't tend to recur a ton. And so if he can get that foot healthy, and if he can get, just his mind right in general, and if he can start to mold and shape himself into that offense, then I think there's no reason why he can't be a top 12 running back. Definitely not.
All right. Should we dig into the next guy? I think that's Cam Newton's been talked about a lot. I'm curious about this one. This one is a guy that's been a staple of fantasy football for a long time, mainly because of the receivers he's supported, and that's Big Ben. So I know he had, I believe it was Tommy John surgery or whatever on his elbow, which from my understanding is not very
injury
common in football players.
The baseball injury for sure.
Yeah, it is. So, okay, sorry, I thought you were going to keep going.
Oh, no, go for it.
So he had, what he did is he ruptured the inside, it's called the ulnar collateral ligament in his throwing elbow. And yeah, that's a very, very common baseball injury. But what happens is basically he was 38 years old, right? And he's thrown like 600 passes a year for the last like 10 years. And so the elbow just eventually gave way. And he actually, it's not 100% certain that he had the Tommy John. If you go to fantasypoints.com, I did an entire breakdown on it, but there's a very, very good chance that he had a primary repair, which means they didn't actually replace the ligament. What they did is they could have stitched the ligament, and that's a little riskier because the data on that isn't as fantastic. Like there's just not that it's a bad surgery in general, but there's not as much data as there is behind the Tommy John. And the reason that they might have done that is because it's a much quicker turnaround. And we know that he was throwing passes in March. He was on his he was throwing like 20, I think he said like 20 passes, 40 yards, like 3 times a day or something in March. And so he's slowly coming back to throwing. Now, what you have to worry about with him just in general is that he's 38 years old. Like I said, it's the same reason that you are sort of cautious with Tom Brady, the same reason you're cautious with Drew Brees. Like all these geriatric quarterbacks that are sort of aging out, those are the dudes that you have to start worrying about overuse injuries, ligament ruptures, and their bodies. I hate using the phrase breaking down because they're still like young humans. But when it comes to like athleticism and being a top elite athlete, like they're old. They're just old. And their bodies at this point have put up with a lot of shit from them. And so, can I cuss? Sorry, I cuss.
Yeah, anytime.
Okay. So their bodies have put up with a lot of shit at this point, and the likelihood of like an overuse injury in any one of their ligaments is much higher than it is in a younger person.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Again, like people love throwing the like the older you are, the more injury prone you are, and especially like that applies mostly to the quarterback position. We'll go over a couple older receivers later in the episode, but yeah, when it comes to quarterbacks, obviously as you mentioned, like your body's breaking down, you're taking poundings every year, as you mentioned, 600 plus attempts. He's throwing at such a high volume to the point where, yes, you mentioned the elbow breaking down, the absolute pressure he's facing from opposing defense. Like it's a lot, but overall, where do you see his overall value kind of residing for this season, given the factors of the elbow, the breaking down aspect to his game? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, like in Scott Fishbowl, it's a two quarterback super flex. I would have felt okay taking him as my second quarterback, for example. I would have felt a lot more comfortable like if he was my third quarterback, just because his ceiling is so high because he does throw the ball so much. And they're in a division with Lamar Jackson, right? I mean, yeah, they're going to have to put up points at some point, and you'd think that Big Ben's going to have to toss the ball around quite a bit. And we know that he is just a high volume dude. So am I concerned? No, I don't think people are necessarily overdrafting him. And I think if you take him as like a QB2 or a QB3 and two quarterback leagues, then that's totally fine. If you're taking him as like your QB1, I feel like you're taking a little bit of a risk there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the channel saying that I've really been a fan of Roethlisberger, but again, as you mentioned, like he's a guy where like if you have him as your one, it gives you kind of hesitance simply because, as you mentioned, I mean, the age, the elbow, like everything like kind of applies here.
People are just bored of him, I think. I swear to God.
That applies too.
No one wants to acknowledge the fact that when every time Ben's played, he's going to throw the ball 600 plus times a season. So like it really isn't it as long as his health is okay, and the fact that his age is advanced, and like this surgery maybe affects him a little bit, like as long as that's all clear, I think he's going to be a top 12 fantasy quarterback, because he's always been a top 12 fantasy quarterback.
For sure. Touching upon the next guy, we kind of went over Roethlisberger again. The risk return on him, getting him as your quarterback 2 or 3 in a super flex would be the more optimal play. But touching on this guy, this is a guy who, when we last saw him on the field, for the first 8 games of last year, he was a legitimate top 4 quarterback at the position. It's Matthew Stafford from the Detroit Lions. Again, we know by now, first 8 games, he was fantastic. Last 8, he suffered the broken back. I believe it was actually a similar injury to what we saw from Tony Romo at the end of his career. But can you indulge a little bit more on that? Because while I kind of have like some like narrative behind it, I want to hear it straight from the doctor's mouth, straight big facts. Let's hear it.
So the thing about this fracture, so what it is, and it was weird because he's had it 2 years in a row now. It's you have the vertebrae, right? So you have 12, they're called thoracic vertebrae. They're the middle of your back. And what he had were fractures on sort of like the wing, sort of on the outside of that bone. And those are extremely painful because there's nothing, first of all, you can't do anything to heal those. You can't increase healing time. You literally just have to wait until they get better. So you can't really move. You shouldn't bend forward too much, extend backwards. And then another thing that they do is they tend to cause back spasms because your body is just trying to stabilize that area, because your body feels like something like basically your body's like, what the hell's going on here? And so your muscles spasm, they lock up, they try to protect you. And so it's just an extremely thing to do. To deal with. And so the fact that he's 32, he's dealt with, this 2 years in a row now. It's really, I don't want to say concerning, because it's not concerning, but it's not nothing, if that makes sense. And even more so than Big Ben, like Stafford has just as much potential. I think he has just as much of a ceiling, but I think that his floor is just as low. His floor is nothing, because if he has another one of these fractures, which at this point he's had 2, there's no reason to believe that he can't have 3, then that's really something that you need to be careful for, you need to watch out for. But again, his ceiling's so, like, the dude was balling out when he was on the field.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
When he was playing. And so that's really difficult to ignore. But again, those are all of the range of outcomes with him are extremely high. And that's why I like to view players in terms of like, what is their volatility, right, compared to average. And compared to average, Matthew Stafford's volatility is a lot higher than a lot of other quarterbacks.
For sure. So, I mean, like when talking about that, obviously, as you mentioned, the ceiling last year, 19-5 ratio, top 4 quarterback, the floor, as you mentioned, being on par with a guy like Big Ben due to the constant issues with the back over the past few years, as you said. But where would you mostly feel comfortable if you're in a fantasy draft, regardless, super flex, 1 QB? It doesn't matter. Where would you feel comfortable in terms of like quarterback type off the board, given those injury concerns?
With Stafford, right?
Yeah, correct.
I think, I would not. I mean, I'd feel okay taking him probably as like one of my late round options, because I think last time I checked, he's definitely falling to like 14, 15 range.
I think he's between 12 and 15.
Yeah. So like that's probably fine. I'm probably okay with that. I would be more, and I don't always carry 2 quarterbacks, but I would be more likely to carry another quarterback if Stafford is the first 2 that I took as my late option.
You can take both of them.
Yeah.
Ben and
right. Yeah, exactly.
High risk, high reward, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
Thank you on those quarterbacks. We will actually indulge into the running backs. And it's a very polarizing figure, because obviously we've seen what he's able to do when he's healthy. Kind of missed the last few games of last year, which people have generated narratives over the offseason. Obviously, the contract dispute is one, but not really what we're talking about here. It's going to be Dalvin Cook, running back from the Minnesota Vikings. Kind of both his injury situation versus like how his value and like maybe Alex Madison's value would be impacted because of it. So what are your thoughts overall on the injuries that Dalvin Cook has experienced, especially specifically his second year off of that torn ACL he had as a rookie?
So the ACL doesn't bother me. That's not something that I'm really concerned about anymore. It's something you do keep track of, but at this point he's 2 years out, and it's not really something that I'm really looking at too hard. What I am looking at is that shoulder. He's dislocated his shoulder, left or right, this is the 4th time since high school. And that's just a dude who is, unfortunately, surgery or no surgery, he has a propensity to dislocate his shoulder, and that happens, right? So, excuse me, we learn in school you're either born loose or you're torn loose. And Dalvin Cook just seems to be a dude that was born loose. And it doesn't matter all the surgeries in the world to repair it. He's already redislocated that shoulder. And your first year back from that injury is when you have the highest chance of re-tearing. The highest, or I guess I should say the lowest chance, or the numbers that are best in Dalvin Cook's number and Dalvin Cook's favor, is a 42% chance to redislocate. His worst, absolute worst, like worst case scenario is a 55% chance. And those are based off of 2 studies. I can send you guys, they're medical studies on NFL players. When you look at the 42%, those were players who dislocated in college, didn't have surgery, and then went on to the NFL. They all redislocated within like 15 weeks. And the other study that I'm talking about, the 55%, those were players who dislocated in the NFL, didn't have surgery, came back that same season, and then redislocated again. And they all redislocated within a pretty short time frame too. So again, this is all about volatility. And so when it comes to Dalvin Cook, it's not so much like, is he or is he not, gonna injure himself, or is he risky? Is he talented? But none of those things are the questions. The question is, how volatile is he? And compared to the other, because he's a pretty top, I would say he's a top 5 running back just from a talent perspective.
We literally had this conversation right before you came on.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's legitimately like one of the like top 3 or 4 fantasy running backs. But when he's on the field, the problem is the numbers and the percentages just aren't in his favor to stay healthy. And if he does redislocate, there's a really good chance that, considering everything we know about him, that he's going to have surgery again, and that's a 9-month layoff. Ergo, go get Alexander Mattison like I drafted in like all of my drafts this year late. You can get him in like the 12th round. Just let him ride your bench. I think that this is going to be one of the years where he breaks out.
Okay, so if you're on the clock, this is a hypothetical. So based on what you said, I would assume you're going to take Alvin Kamara over him, and you're going to take Zeke Elliott over him. Are you going to pick
Absolutely.
Derrick Henry or Joe Mixon over Dalvin Cook if faced with the choice?
Probably not Derrick Henry, probably Joe Mixon. I'm probably taking Joe Mixon over Dalvin Cook, but then I'm probably looking towards Michael Thomas or Devontae Adams if I'm looking at Derrick Henry versus Dalvin Cook.
Okay, so you're pretty all hands off on Dalvin Cook. I'm kind of the same belief. I don't like to take big risks like that in the first round of my draft.
Yeah, you can definitely lose and that's such a cliche thing. Like people say you can't win it in your first round, but you can lose it. And I definitely agree with that. I think you can definitely lose it. Now, you can take Dalvin Cook, but if you play in a league full of pricks like I do, then they'll take Alexander Madison in like the 6th round and they'll just throw him on their bench. Like that happened to me last year with who was it? Some dude, I think some dude took Tony Pollard for me, or I don't even remember. It was one of my leagues, but he literally like took that draft pick and then he texted me and he just said like one word. He's like, eat that or something like that, or eat it or something like that. I was like, man, you're the worst.
That's always the best. I mean, I remember I had Dalvin last year, and I kind of like had to like fully work the phone and convince my friend to like trade me like Alex Madison for like another like bench piece, just simply because, as you mentioned, like the value of having a guy like Madison with his overall talent level, potential upside if Cook were to miss time. Now, speaking about that, if you say you take Dalvin Cook, I don't know, 106, 107, let's just say like the other 2 receivers are off, the running backs are off. Hypothetical. What is the earliest you would take Alex Madison, knowing the concerns there, knowing the overall like unlikeliness, as you mentioned, 42 to 55% that he plays the full season?
I think if I'm playing that game, I'm probably getting filling a starting lineup, and then within 1 or 2 picks, taking Alex Madison.
Makes sense.
Okay,
especially
like
if he's my first round pick.
Round is when you're going to be looking at that then.
Mm-hmm. I'd consider it. I'm not necessarily and it all depends, right? It's context specific. Every draft is different. If somebody like like Robert Woods is there in the 9th round or something stupid, right? I'm probably going to take Robert Woods, but
for sure.
Plus, there's going to be I think the contract thing is real. I know we're not really talking about that right now, but I think Alex Madison's going to get more and more expensive the longer Dalvin Cook's not in camp and stuff. So
100%. I mean, if you're in a dynasty league, like Alex Madison is going to be the guy, because as Lucas will say multiple times, like it's just so unlikely given their cap situation that Cook is going to come back. So, I mean, Alex Madison, make sure you grab him because that's going to be some potential value there. But, segueing off of Dalvin Cook, we're actually going to go back to another recent top 10, top 5 actually overall running back. We saw him in 2018 just absolutely shredding it for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that will be James Conner. So we know the story about James Conner right now. In college, he had a fantastic career. He ended up actually middle of his college career, he ended up actually having cancer. Unfortunate for him. Made a full recovery ever since he got drafted. Spent the 1 year behind Le'Veon. Le'Veon holds out, and James Conner took over. Like, he was a pure bell cow in 2018. But talking about him, we're going to mention, again, the injuries at the end of the 2018 season and the injuries that kind of hindered him throughout 2019. But we're kind of both on board. If he's able to stay healthy, I mean, he's got legitimate, like, top 12, top 10 type upside. But what are your thoughts overall on the injuries officially affecting his overall stock? Sorry about that.
I think that James Conner is such an interesting case study. He's an intriguing case study. He is a guy that specifically because of the cancer, specifically because of his situation and everything that he's gone through, you can't apply the data that exists on NFL running backs for him. It's such an interesting thing, man. He tore his MCL, right? That was his rookie year, and he needed surgery for it. Only 4%, less than 5% of NFL players who tear their MCL need surgery for it because that ligament heals on its own. But he needed surgery for it. That's interesting. That's intriguing. Another thing is he obviously came. So that's a connective tissue issue. Yeah. Then he came back the year that Le'Veon sat out, and he played and he dominated. But then he had a high ankle sprain. You know, a high ankle sprain is another connective tissue injury, right? Comes back, 2019 hits. He has this SC joint separation. That's a connective tissue issue. So you back up, you look at James Conner, this guy who had cancer treatment, and we know that cancer treatment is so non-specific, right? Cancer treatment essentially, in a nutshell, just blasts all of your cells because you can't really target cancer just based off of the way that it works in the body. And so what we do, we just blast every cell. And so when all those cells get blasted, it could, any type of procedure, not even just cancer treatment, any type of treatment can potentially change the way your DNA mutates and change the way that your body creates connective tissue, creates all these different products, man. The entire body is so intertwined so intricately. And I'm not saying that's what happened with James Conner, but he's such an interesting case study because you look at a person who's had only connective tissue injuries. He's had cancer. He came back from it. And you're looking at a dude who's only had connective tissue injuries, and it just begs the question, did the cancer treatment cause something in his body to it's called epigenetics, to sort of unveil the way that his body makes this connective tissue, and is his body not able to just hold up to NFL standards, to NFL contact? And that's just something that I worry about with James Conner. And considering that the Steelers drafted a running back and they have like 2 waiting in the wings, it just makes you not as confident in him being an RB1. I definitely would not take James Conner as my RB1. Awesome story. Awesome. The whole thing is like, I legitimately so awesome. Such a badass story that he beat cancer. It's fantastic. But from NFL and like fantasy perspective, it's just not, he's not a person that I necessarily trust or want on my roster.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to touch on there is I'll put this on the screen right now. This is what he dealt with last year. So he had a quadriceps contusion, AC joint sprain, quadriceps strain, ankle sprain, knee sprain. So what you're basically saying is that he is more susceptible to minor injuries and nagging injuries potentially then?
It seems that way, yeah. I don't want to say like absolutely it is and this is a cause and effect, but it just seems like he takes for the amount of contact that he takes, he's injured more often with those types of injuries than other running backs. It just seems like that to me.
It's definitely interesting too, because even like the AC joint sprain, for example, I don't know how it affects the majority of people, but he missed 5 games off of it. And I know for a fact that when Dak got it, he came back the next week and was able to play. Now you could tell he was hurt. Maybe they rushed him back. Just in general, like in terms of like a range like that, would that kind of affect like the recovery times too? Like, or is that just normal?
It could, absolutely.
Okay.
And he could have just came back when he wasn't ready for it too.
Okay.
So you can't really pinpoint it and say, oh yeah, he did take a longer recovery. Because I don't know if you remember, he injured it and then came back in like 2 weeks and then injured it again and then had to sit out another couple games. And so he could have just, came back too soon. But at the same time, like you were saying, Dak played the very next week. Dak plays a different position, obviously. Yeah. But it was one of those things that just makes you scratch your head and say, well, why couldn't he heal, to the point where he needed to sit out again? again, this is all one giant case study that we have to like pick apart and use clinical reasoning for, because there's very, very little data. I mean, there's zero data or evidence on any type of injuries for a dude who, has cancer or had cancer and played in the NFL.
Yeah. And I think the way that the Steelers have built their backfield is very smart, because James Conner and Benny Snell are kind of like the same type of running back, and as are Anthony McFarland and Jalen Samuels. So you kind of have a lot of insurance there if you're the Steelers from a real life football perspective. But I mean, yeah, like you said, you don't want him as your RB1, but on this channel, we've preached the RB heavy tactic at the beginning. And if you can get James Conner in the fourth round and he's your RB3, dude, you're looking at a guy who who ranked number 3 in the NFL in opportunity share in 2018. He had a snap share in the top 6. He had 40 red zone touches, 71 targets, 21.2 fantasy points per game in 12 and a half games. So, yeah, I mean, the dude.
If he's your RB3, absolutely.
Exactly. The dude's pretty much a stud when he's on the field. And he is definitely risky. He's definitely risky, but you can mitigate that risk by taking Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake in the first 2 rounds so that he's not your RB1.
For sure. I mean, again, touching upon him, like I know me and Corey, I believe you have him at 17 as well. We both kind of have him in that top 20 area. Where would you personally kind of like have him like in terms of the risk reward type balance there in terms of like where you would feel comfortable?
Where would I? Sorry, you cut out.
What round? What roundish?
What round? What area? Like, would you consider him like a top 14 to 20 type back? Like top 20 to 26? Like, where would you kind of like most feel comfortable or most like reason with yourself for taking him?
He's one of those guys that I don't think I'd necessarily look to him as like what ceiling can he provide me. I would look at where can I take him and it won't hurt me. Like that's how I'm viewing it, sort of flipping it. And I think that at the point where he's like you guys were saying, like an RB3, like if I take him as like my flex dude, so what is that, round like 5, 6-ish? If he's still there, unfortunately, I think people are taking him way.
I think he'll be gone in the early, late 3rd, early 4th range is probably where it's going to go.
I honestly think like by the end of the offseason, for example, we've seen multiple guys like the multiple guys will be pushed up, and I think he's just going to be a guy like over the offseason kind of push into that mid-3rd, late 3rd type area, which would be too early. But like, yeah, as you mentioned, like if you can get him in like the early 5th, late 4th, even like I wouldn't care.
I'm okay with him in the 4th round, in my opinion. If I have 2 running backs and a receiver already, I think I'm okay with him as my 4th pick.
Especially if he's in like, let's just play hypothetical. Especially if he's in the late 4 and you're getting him as like, say you're at like the 104, 105 area, and he falls to you like, what would that be? The 408, 407, like. That's a smash because you're going to have a top 5 type locked up running back. You could take the risk on a guy like that because you know you're getting points regardless. So really like that. Now, a guy that me and Bush have been like, we hate him. Like we absolutely, like we hate this guy. But a lot of people in the community seem to love him. I mean, people preach RB heavy, and like he's like their 2nd round pick if you look at freaking Joseph Robert over there. But we're talking about Todd Gurley. I mean, we know the story with Todd Gurley by now. He suffered the injuries in college. We've known that obviously the ACLs were torn, I believe, 2-3 times since he's been in college. But the main concern we're going to talk about is the knee arthritis caused by those injuries. So what are your thoughts on that overall underlying injury, if you want to say?
Yeah, no, it is. And it's a difficult thing to decipher because with Gurley, so he actually tore his ACL in college, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And for him, unfortunately, that's all it took for him to go into this fall into this cascade of arthritis, right? Symptomatic arthritis. A lot of people have arthritis and it's not symptomatic, but for him, it's symptomatic. And all arthritis is your body is stuck in this constant cycle of inflammation, of pain, of swelling, of your muscle your quad muscle, for example, not working as well. So that's what arthritis is, because your body, it thinks that it needs to heal this place in your body, which is, so in Gurley's case, it's his knee. The body thinks it needs to heal the inside of the knee, and it does because there's damage there. But the problem is that damage is done. It's permanent. There's nothing that the body at this point can do. And the reason that happens is because they go in, the ACL is damaged in the first place, and then surgery comes in. A lot of people don't understand, even though surgery is, a miracle in a lot of cases, it's still a damage. It's still a trauma to the body. It's still damaging the body. You're taking a massive knife. You're cutting open the body, and you're scraping around inside a joint. Like that's still a trauma to the body that the body has to get over. So unfortunately, his body has succumbed to this constant healing process. And what that does is it doesn't even have to be painful, but a lot of times the muscle will shut down because of there's like, it's like a very minimal amount. It's like 50 cc's of fluid. And what happens is the quad muscle will stop working because the brain tells it to stop working because, in evolution, essentially we learned as a human species, if something hurts or if something is wrong somewhere downstream, the brain is going to shut it down. That way you stop doing what you're doing and you check it out, you see what's going on, you rest and you let it get better. The problem with this condition is that it never gets better. In fact, with age, it gets worse. And so I don't understand why last year we were at this place where we were saying, don't draft Todd Gurley as a top, 12 running back. And it seemed like the industry got it. And I was like, oh, awesome. Like we finally get it. Like there were some ding dongs out there still taking Gurley at like 101.
Oh, there was a lot of ding dongs.
A lot of ding dongs.
Like people were taking him in the first, second round. I'm like, what are you doing?
The 25% argument. Did you hear that last year? If you take off 25% of his fantasy production from his last 2 years, he still would have been the RB1.
Right. Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite arguments.
Bobby?
Oh yeah.
A lot of people use that type of logic, but the problem is this doesn't get better with time, guys. And that's what I wish that I could like drive home. This condition, even if it didn't get worse, even if he stayed in the exact same place that he was last year, his efficiency dropped by like 40 slots or something crazy, according to Player Profiler. Efficiency obviously is sort of subjective, but even relatively speaking in that specific realm, after you account for offensive line play, which his offensive line was worse than in 18, but his efficiency tanked. It was awful. And that has to do with the knee. And so like I was saying, even if he's still in the exact same place as he was last year, look what he did last year. Why are you still taking him as a top 10 pick? That
he did score 12 touchdowns. He would have been awful.
Right. Exactly. I mean, this one gets me fired up because I don't think people get
flash to people. The Rams rushing offense is much better than the Falcons rushing offense. Dirk Utter was the coach of my favorite team for 3 years. You saw what he did with Ronald Jones his rookie year. Like he doesn't know how to fucking run a rushing attack to save his life. So
that's true.
Like all the way out on Gurley every day of the week.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about it as Bush has mentioned multiple times. I mean, we saw last year the Rams, he had 59 red zone attempts. This year, Devontae Freeman vacating 25. So it's like, or 34. It was a 25 discrepancy. Yeah. So it's like, why do people think he has more touchdown upside this year? It doesn't make sense.
It was pretty much the Rams had the most. They ran like the ball like the third most in the red zone, and the Falcons ran it by far the least in the red zone or something. It was like a big discrepancy.
And the Falcons, like even like starting like a couple of years ago, even when Devontae Freeman was running wild, I mean, they still split those carries, right? Yeah. I mean, they still split the backfield. So it's not like he's going to have all this work to himself. And if his efficiency is just as bad as last year, the argument that some people might make about, well, even if you shave off blah, 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 like now his efficiency is worse than it was in 18 by like a lot.
Yeah. And he was like a top 5 running back in the NFL for like probably 2 years for sure. 17 and 18. He was by far he was the best running back in the league in 2017. So, I mean, like, to go from even like average efficiency to what he went to would have been a huge jump. Not to mention he went to bad efficiency.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean that's one that fires us up. We've said it multiple times. I think he's the RB 16 on consensus right now. Or ADP. He's going at like the early 3rd round right now. Like, what are people doing? So, I mean, we've heard what you said. We're kind of in the same boat. I believe we both have him outside our top 20s. Might be closer to that 25 area. But what are your thoughts? Like, where would you like? If you ever had, like, gun in your head, you have to take him. Like, where would you ever feel comfortable even touching him?
After I fill my flex, that's like
got to be like a 6th round pick for me to pick.
Yeah,
him. Agreed. Like, I can't pick him in the.
It's not like he's gonna be.
Rounds.
It's not like he's gonna be bad. I don't think. It's just like, I don't think he's gonna be consistent. B, I don't think he's gonna be efficient. C, I don't think he's gonna have all of the volume that people think he's gonna have.
He's basically David Montgomery, except David Montgomery, there's a chance he's actually good.
Exactly.
True. I mean, that's a really good way to put it.
The funny thing that fires me up, again, we mentioned the red zone attempts, the overall volume he's going to get, but like people think he's going to return to that like prime Rams like passing game usage, and I'm just like, what? Why?
He dropped like 9 balls on 50 targets last year.
Hey man, I hope he does, right? I mean, I for his health.
I don't, because I'm not going to own him anywhere.
Yeah, maybe he could like go off in like the preseason. People get hyped. He gets taken even earlier. Let's just hope if he even touched that, which I'm sure. Actually, there's no preseason.
If people want to keep
what am I talking about? There's no preseason.
That's fine with me.
There's no preseason. I forgot COVID. Whatever. Talking about the next guy, guy that we're actually like a little bit higher on, simply because of like how low he's regarded in the fantasy community. Like people think he's just a bum that's never gonna.
He's dirt for fantasy. Apparently,
dirt. He's garbage. Never gonna go back to like that first round upside we saw even in his first rookie season. And we're gonna be talking about Sony Michel. So we know by now, obviously, the knee sprain last year was the arthroscopic knee surgery, and then this year he had the foot surgery in the off season. So. We couldn't find exact research on what was the exact reasoning behind the foot surgery. Like, we didn't know the actual injury. But if you have like anything you want to talk about here, especially with Michel, because I mean, I don't think his value can get any lower than it currently is. Like, people hate him.
I think honestly, man, I don't know how much value Sony Michel actually. What did he finish last year? Do you guys know?
It was probably like RB22 or something boring.
I think he was RB26. I actually in a recent video, I literally said the only thing separating him from David Montgomery were the injury concerns. And that was back before he even had the foot surgery. So I compared them, and there are numbers in terms of like passing game usage, running efficiency. Like, they were the exact same player. I put like a player A, player B, and like you could not tell the difference. Like, same yards per carry, same touchdown output. Like, it was the exact same. But
and that's sort of where that's where I stand with him. And he has probably the same issues that Todd Gurley has. You just don't hear about it because he's had like 3 knee surgeries in the last 2 years, and he had an ACL tear in high school. So he's probably dealing with the same stuff that Gurley is. And so, like, not to repeat everything I just said about him, but he's got this like arthritic knee, probably. I can't say for sure, but he's probably got at least some sort of symptoms in that regard. And now he's got the foot surgery, and it's like, well, I mean, yeah, on one side you can look at it and say, well, maybe he had this first foot surgery and that's what's been holding him back. Maybe that, now he's going to be a lot better. He's going to have better bursts, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, he's 25 years old at this point. Like, we've probably seen what we're going to see out of Sony Michel. Even if he stays exactly where he is, again, with like the Gurley argument, even if he stays in the same health and the same offense that he is as he was last year, like, what can you really expect from a guy? I think he averaged like 3.5 yards per carry. I know yards per carry
might hurt him too, because Cam might take away his only thing, which is touchdown upside.
Right. So it's like one of those things that you look at him and you're like, nah. It's like you were saying, it's just a boring, like, I guess I'll throw him on the end of my bench because I might need a fill-in for a bye week.
I think there's equal chance that by week 6, Damian Harris is getting more carries than there is Sony Michel is a top 15 running back. I think equal chance. There's like, because if Sony Michel somehow comes out and is like a 9th round pick in fantasy drafts and is like a top 15 running back because he scores 11 touchdowns and gets 250 plus carries. Yeah. But I mean, you're probably also not going to like owning him if he's your like RB2 or something. But obviously where he's going, I'm kind of willing to take the risk just because he's like,
it's so late. It's like
super late pick. Like, he's not like a 6th, 5th round pick. Like, he probably should be if we were just looking at the situation objectively without his injury concerns and all that stuff.
And it's crazy to me because I was so much like, it's crazy now, like, just one surgery like impacts my thoughts. But man, before the foot surgery, I know me and Bush, we
had him
as like our RB25, RB26. We were like, okay, you know what? He's a good like upside candidate later on because he's going to produce so much more than what everybody's like ranking him at. But yeah, once that foot surgery kind of happened, the addition to Cam, like, I became much lower on him. He dropped to like 33 or so in my rankings. It's just like, it's so many question marks to the point where, like, if he's there in like the 9th, 10th round area, like, I'll probably just get him, especially if I go super risky at the beginning of the draft. But like, it's not something you're excited about. It's not like you're taking like, oh, Mecole Hardman in that area. Like, that's definitely someone I want to target because he's flashy, he's efficient, he's like a really talented football player. Like, you're kind of just taking Michel. You're like, you know what? If I need a flex week, RB2.
Take Frank Gore, but 10 years younger.
Yeah, like. But what are your thoughts on Michel in terms of like what you kind of expect versus like where you'd feel comfortable taking him overall?
I think that what I expect and where I would take him are probably lined up pretty well. I don't think I'd take him anything before like a bench ad. I'd probably draft all my starters and then honestly, he's one of those dudes that like, and Scott Barrett over at Fantasy Points, he recently did an article on basically drafting for upside. And if I was faced after I drafted all my starters with Alexander Mattison versus Sony Michel, and those were my options, I'd take Madison 10 times out of 10 times. I don't know if that.
You might get 5 games out of Madison that are going to be like Michel's best 5 games, and you'll actually 100%. Know when to start Madison in those games as opposed to Sony Michel.
Exactly, 100%.
For sure. That definitely makes sense. Again, it kind of touched up upon it. Like, it's just so many question marks, so much boringness. It's like, if you've got any exciting type of player on the board, just go with them because, like, realistically here, like, for example, a guy like Zach Moss, for example, I think is probably going in around the similar range. If he's on the board, like, I would take him because I know that, like, he's still going to get a workload and he's actually got some type of upside. I mean, I love Devin Singletary, but realistically, like, who's going to get the red zone type workload? I mean, we saw last year, freaking Frank Gore's carcass got like 26 red zone opportunities. Like, he was like hobbling around, just like doing his thing that he's been doing like the past 25 years, it seems. But
literally,
yeah, no, a guy that we're going to talk about now, again, a guy who
this one I'm very interested in.
Yes, because I mean, we kind of tanked them because of the uncertainty, but especially with the Hyde edition. But when we saw Chris Carson like healthy last year, he was a top 10 running back in fantasy, especially in like standard half PPR formats. But the big thing is the hip fracture. And then obviously they added, I mean, Carlos Hyde's not too inspiring, but like it just shows that they really felt like they need to add up in terms of depth. But the hip fracture really, really scares me. I end up having him on like my RB's 26 or 27 right now because of it. But what are your thoughts on Chris Carson due to that, specifically the hip fracture?
So I think that first of all, he is one of those dudes that's like, if he gets the volume, he's good.
Yeah.
The second thing is you don't know, and we don't know how that hip fracture is going to behave and how that hip and that injury is going to behave in 2020 simply because there's no data on it. Again, it's one of those injuries that doesn't have a ton of data on it. You go based off clinical sort of knowledge, and we just don't really know enough about the fracture. What was the nature of it? How bad was it? Why didn't he have surgery? Was surgery recommended, but he, didn't go through with it? Did they say don't have surgery? We just there are too many unknowns to really be certain and say, oh yeah, he's going to stay healthy, or oh yeah, he's going to refracture it. You also look at another team who drafted another running back who has Rashad Penny, who should be back probably by like week 6 at least at the latest. And it just turns into this mess. It's a headache. They're going to run the ball a lot, but I think that in terms of knowing who's going to get the passing work, who's going to get the goal line work, who's going to be in between the 20s, that's going to be something that's just something that I don't want to have to deal with outside of like another, maybe like a flex play. And I think that's where I'd take
I'll
Chris
wait till
Carson.
next year when Derrick Henry's their starting running back.
Exactly. There you go.
Darrington Evans stonks going up, but talking about that. But yeah, with Carson, I mean, like before, obviously, like earlier in the offseason, before they drafted a running back, before they got Carlos Hyde, like I was like, you know what? I mean, like if he can stay healthy, they haven't really added much to the position. Maybe he's gonna be like that top 15 type running back with that upside. But man, like I see him now. People still have him ranked in like as like their RB 16, 17. It's too high because like we don't, as you mentioned, we don't know what's gonna go on in that backfield. As you mentioned, it's so uncertain what's going on with the hip, as you mentioned, not enough data to really like pinpoint what exactly is the severity of it. So I mean, where would you, like as you mentioned, flex play, like what kind of RB range, like 25, 30?
RB 19 off the board right now, just FYI.
Like that.
He's at RB 19.
Yeah, and he's an early 3rd round pick.
That's gross.
Ooh.
I know.
That's a little early for me. Maybe that's probably when I'd start to consider it. Maybe not in the 3rd round.
He's
I
like
wouldn't take
Gurley
him in the 3rd
territory
round.
for me. Like,
yeah, that's really early.
Like, at least with Gurley, I know he has the workload if he's on the like field. I guess.
Didn't you say Gurley's going in the 4th?
You said no. Gurley's going 302, I believe, right now.
Yeah, like
yeah. I definitely wouldn't take Carson there. Yeah, I wouldn't take Carson there.
Gurley's off the board at the 27th pick, and Carson's the 32nd pick.
Yeah, so
I'd wait at least another 2 rounds to take Carson.
Like if you, again, like as we said with Gurley, like if he was like a 5th, 6th type round pick, like that's the value that they should be. But again, man, this offseason especially, like everybody's preaching, load up on running backs, loading up on running backs. And like all these running backs ADP seem to be pushed up like 2 rounds. It's insane. Like, for example, we mentioned those guys. Like, I don't know how Gurley's going above Melvin Gordon right now, but that's not really why we're here right now. But anyway, another really talented. Like I love this guy coming out of college. I mean, LSU. We know how good he was at LSU, but like that's the narrative we have to have around him because realistically, he's played in 5 out of a possible 32 games.
Never seen more than 13 touches either. Missed
his whole rookie season, but man, like again, when he gets a decent workload, we've seen him be super efficient, which is kind of the whole hope on him now. It's going to be Derrius Guice. I mean, that Redskins running back situation a mess, but man, there's something in me that still believes he can get there, but obviously I can't rank him there. But what are your thoughts on Guice? Because he's like the riskiest, but like such reward if he's actually able to turn
Is
around.
He though?
And stay healthy. Dude, I think if he's healthy, he's a top 15 running back. Like I really do.
I don't think he's a top 15 running back simply because I don't think that they're even going to give him the volume to let him get there. And that's because I think that they're going to take it as slow as they can with him. At this point, he's had 2 intra-articular, so inside the joint surgeries, and another MCL sprain that was pretty severe. I don't think that it's not so much that he can't be as athletic as he was coming out of college, but it's those surgeries didn't help him, if that makes sense. Yeah. You also have to look at it from the perspective of like, he's got to show us, like he's got to show us that he can put up with, he can hold up in that volume. And it's not so much that those injuries weren't necessarily something that had to do with volume, but he was only at LSU for 2 years. And I think I don't even know how much he played.
He was behind Fournette the first year too.
Yeah, exactly. So he didn't even have that much volume. So the number one predictor for injury in the NFL is injury in college. And so the opposite's also true. The number one predictor to stay healthy in the NFL is being healthy in college. But he really only had 1 year in college we can judge him by, and that's a pretty small sample. So if anything, when he tore the ACL his first year in the NFL, and then the second year he tore his meniscus, and then he had the MCL, who's to say that would not have happened to him in college? And so when I look at Derrius Guice, it's not even so much as it is, I guess, it has to do with there's data that shows a year after a meniscectomy, which is what he had, that players see fewer snaps and they're on the field for not as much. You also have that the Washington team obviously picked up another running back, and they Peyton Barber. They still have 80-year-old Adrian Peterson who's still on the roster. So they have Bryce Love
this year, probably.
They're obviously hedging their bets on him. And so when I look at Derrius Guice, he's a dude that I'm looking at and I'm saying, like, prove it to me first before I really trust you, outside of like a flex play.
Yeah, like that's the range. Obviously, like I would consider him as well. Probably like
I wouldn't pick him until the double-digit rounds, dude, because in my opinion, like, what do we want a part of this? Like this situation isn't clear enough to me. Like you said, they have Antonio Gibson, they have Peyton Barber, they still have like J.D. McKissick and Adrian Peterson.
Yeah.
I mean,
Chris Thompson. Didn't they sign Chris Thompson?
Or no, Chris Thompson's on the Jags now.
Yeah.
But
oh, that's right.
Followed
the whole situation is just not good. The offense is going to suck. It's going to be a bottom 10 offense in the NFL unless Dwayne Haskins pulls something out of his ass and is like an elite quarterback all of a sudden. But the team isn't going to be good, and he's not like a bell cow to the point that you're like, okay, this guy's going to just get 20 carries a game and that's how he's going to give me value. To me, his upside is literally like RB15, which is like pretty similar to Sony Michel's upside in my opinion. So I'm just not that interested in Guice. I know he was very talented and he probably still is, but he's still like, I mean, I'll check where he's going off the board right now, but I think he's still just too much of a risk at where he's going. He's not like going late enough for me to the point that I'm willing to take the risk on him.
I definitely get that. My thing with him is like, you don't want him to be like one of your first 3 running backs. Like you don't want him to be your RB1, RB2, RB3 in my opinion. But if you can get him as your RB4, hear me out. I mean, like I'm going to take that every time because simply put,
I'll tell you what receivers you can get around him. That's my concern.
That's fair. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I still kind of have that hope. Again, you mentioned Sony Michel. I think he's got a much higher ceiling than Sony simply because I do see him as like in terms of talent, in terms of even potential to grow into that volume. Again, like he was coming off pretty significant injuries last year, the year before that. Like even when he did play, like why would they feel pressured with that dumpster fire of a season to give him that workload? So I mean, obviously, again, he's not a guy I want as my RB3, RB2, RB1. Or if I can get him like
he's running back 34 right now. One running back ahead of him is James White. The one behind him is Jordan Howard. Give me both those guys every day of the week. And the receivers behind him, man, like Deontay Johnson, Brandon Cooks, Will Fuller, Marvin Jones, like even other running backs too. Tevin Coleman, Matt Breida, like these guys, give him all of them over Derrius Guice, in my opinion.
Like, if I can get him in that like 8th, 9th round area, I wouldn't care. Like I'd be like, okay, I'm all for it. But yeah, as you mentioned, he's probably going in like late 6th, early 7th, where like I'm off there. But yeah, what are your thoughts on him?
He's a 6'5".
Holy, that's too early. But what are your thoughts on him overall, Edwin, in terms of like what round area would you feel comfortable with him? Like what type of running back? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you guys nailed it. I think I'd wait until I have all my starters filled, and then I'd look around. I would say probably the 7th or 8th round, like you were saying. And if I was looking around and my options were Brandon Cooks or Will Fuller, that's where probably I would take Derrius Guice. If I was looking at Derrius Guice versus Marvin Jones, I'd probably take Marvin Jones.
Definitely makes sense. Again, talking about those 2 receivers, those will be on for next episode. So if y'all are watching this, stay tuned because that's going to be a banger of a video. Again, we're going to have them on for 2 straight Thursdays. So definitely intriguing. But the final guy that we're going to bring up, I kind of just added him late last second because I just wanted to like hear your thoughts on him. He's a guy I've roasted all off season simply because people think he's still the 2016 most valuable running back in all of fantasy. And we're going to be talking about David Johnson because people are touting him as like a top 20 running back. I want to hear your thoughts, but like I just don't see it. I just don't.
No, I don't see it either. He's 28 years old. He was in a backfield that was very winnable. It's not like Kenyon Drake is some world beater. I mean, he's good, he's talented, but it's not like he's fantastic. David Johnson couldn't even beat out Chase Edmonds towards the end of the year. And that's not to say that, it's not like we see Sundays, right? That's what we see. We don't see practice. We don't see the training room. We don't see anything that goes on in the position rooms. It's not like David Johnson didn't give an opportunity. Like we said it earlier, veterans get the benefit of the doubt. Starters, especially perennial starters who've been around, they get the benefit of the doubt.
Especially the contract David Johnson signed before last season too.
Exactly, the contract. They get the organization. You don't think that the Cardinals, front office was saying, "Hey, let's get this guy another shot." Like if you don't think that was happening, you're not really a business savvy person. Of course, he probably had the opportunity, and he just didn't. He couldn't take advantage of it. He's 28 years old. The running backs who are 28 years old, that's the maximum amount of age, the maximum age that running backs will see any type of significant volume, 150 carries. That's in a sample of 10 years of 300 running backs. I mean, it's just not there. It's not in the cards for him. It doesn't seem like he's gonna be as effective as people are thinking. I'm not even drafting him, and I hope that answers the question. I don't even care if he's there and I have to draft. I don't know who Darrington Evans you mentioned earlier. I'd probably take Darrington Evans. I have no interest in David Johnson, and I hope that he proves me wrong. I know I'm sounding like a jerk. I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he can come back. But from a physical athleticism perspective, I just don't see it anymore.
I still remember a play last year where legit, it looked like he was jogging behind the line. I don't know what he was doing.
Somebody tweeted that out and was like, David Johnson looks like your Uncle Frank at the Thanksgiving football game after dinner or something like that. It was really funny. I wish I could think of what that was.
It literally looked like he was taking his dog out to a walk at the park. I'm like, what are you doing? There's no type of athleticism at all. I'm like,
he went from a world beater to fully washed within the span of one wrist injury riddled season.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Weirdest thing ever. But
that's still so wild.
That is there. I said it after 2018 when he looked like he couldn't run the ball to save his life. Yeah. People were like, well, he's a first round pick because he's gonna get all this volume. It's yeah, but no. I'm not that's what caused you to draft Le'Veon Bell in the first round last year.
For sure. I mean, I've said it so many times on this channel. His efficiencies last year they're not 2016 overall fantasy MVP level. I mean, he was 55th true yards per carry, 48th yards created, 63rd in yards created per touch, 54th in evaded tackles, and 36th in breakaway run rate. That's how do you get top 20 value? According to so many people, he's going to get a workload. He's going to get a ton of targets. 15.3% target market share for the Texans last year to the running back position. And they still have the target leader in Duke Johnson still there. So, I mean, I don't see it. I mean,
he gets mad about David Johnson every time.
Carlos Hyde was legit a more efficient runner last year. But anyways, we'll wrap this up and then,
don't tell that to Bill O'Brien.
Yeah, no, apparently I honestly I'm surprised Steve Keim didn't get another DUI after he pulled off that trade because that was the steal of the century. The fact that he got not only DeAndre Hopkins for that trade, but he got rid of that freaking contract that David Johnson signed at the same time.
He sent Bill O'Brien a 2016 highlight tape with the package hey man, this is a legit running back you're getting back.
Bill O'Brien punts on the opponent's 30-yard line on Madden.
For sure. All right. So make sure you guys are checking out everything that we're doing. Make sure you guys like this video, comment, subscribe. I think there's a lot of value packed into this. Edwin brings a lot to the table that we do not, aside from mutual hate for David Johnson and Todd Gurley. The draft guide is live, so if you guys want to check that out, you can go ahead and do that in the description below, and we'll link all of Edwin's Twitter account and his fantasy
Website.
points and all that stuff.
Everything.
You got anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
That's it. Check out your guys' draft guide. Check out fantasypoints.com.
Appreciate that. We'll head out. Take it easy, y'all.